Have you ever noticed how sometimes the smartest people in the room run the fastest from the most basic concepts? Well, back in 1999, a researcher named David Bridges noticed exactly this. He dug into a really bizarre, almost alarming trend: academic researchers fleeing from the very idea of truth. So in this explainer, we're going to unpack exactly why some academics became absolutely terrified of this word, and why, despite their absolute best efforts, truth is something you literally cannot escape.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with this supposed flight from truth, then look at why you actually can't escape it. After that, we'll break down 5 distinct theories of truth, see how they apply to educational research, and finally, we'll wrap up by looking at the ultimate postmodernist paradox. Let's jump right in.
So, part 1, the flight from truth, or putting truth in inverted commas. We start our investigation right at the academic conference table, where Bridges noticed a really peculiar habit taking shape.
You see, researchers were suddenly treating the word truth like it was some highly contagious disease. They'd handle it with these metaphorical gloves, basically putting it in inverted commas, air quotes, just to make absolutely sure the audience knew, hey, I'm not associating myself with anything as uncool or absolute as the truth.
Which brings us to the core question, the real stakes for us today. Can we actually just dispense with truth in educational research? I mean, does abandoning it lead us to brilliant, groundbreaking new perspectives? Or does the whole academic endeavor just collapse into total incoherence? That leads us to Section 2. You can't escape truth, otherwise known as the propositional trap, because, as it turns out, simply making a standard statement instantly implies you believe it's true. Now, you might say, well, what if I lie? Or what if I'm just mistaken? But here's the catch. Lying actually relies on the very distinction between truth and falsity. You can't deceive someone unless they presume you're offering the truth in the first place, right? Bridges actually jokes that you could try to escape truth claims by reducing your academic papers to primeval grunts. Like, instead of a careful analysis, you just stand up and yell, Ofsted inspections, roar. But seriously, unless you plan to stick entirely to grunting, any actual proposition you make inherently affirms a truth.
And this brings us to the ultimate gotcha paradox. If a researcher boldly asserts, there is no universal truth, we just have to ask one simple question. Is that statement true? Arguing truthfully that there is no truth is a logical trap you simply cannot escape. Even your negative propositions end up affirming the truth of something, right in the very process of trying to deny it.
Moving on to Section 3, 5 theories of truth and breaking down the monolith. The crucial point here is that truth isn't just one scary, rigid dogma. Philosophy actually gives us 5 distinct lenses to look through.
First up is correspondence. This is pretty much the common sense idea of truth. Basically, a proposition is true if it perfectly matches reality. It's an absolute favorite in the empirical sciences. So if I say average class sizes have grown by 7%, well, that statement is true if, out there in the real world, class sizes actually did grow by 7%. Simple enough, right?
But it definitely has its limits. As this famous quote from philosopher Richard Rorty suggests, the correspondence theory relies heavily on this idea of holding a mirror to nature. But can we ever really hold a perfect mirror? All observation involves some level of human interpretation, and we can't just step entirely outside of our own minds to check reality as it really is against our view of it.
So that brings us to our second lens, the coherence theory of truth. Think of this one like a massive crossword puzzle. Single beliefs aren't just checked one by one against reality. Instead, they're considered true if they hang together and support one another without any contradictions. It's all about building a comprehensive, internally consistent system of ideas.
Third is pragmatism. You might know this as the what works theory. Imagine you diagnose a structural fault in a bridge. Under pragmatism, your diagnosis is considered true if the action you take based on it actually fixes the bridge. Or, my belief that turning the knob on my stove increases the heat is true because in practice, it successfully allows me to cook my dinner.
Then we have our fourth theory, which is consensus. This basically turns truth into a matter of social agreement. We see this all the time in our legal system, right? A person is guilty if a jury of 12 citizens can agree they are guilty. But as researchers, we have to be incredibly careful here. We have to constantly watch out for unexamined traditions, or the dominance of a specific group, or even collective hysteria just masquerading as consensus truth.
And finally, the fifth theory, truth as warranted belief. This approach is highly dynamic. It acknowledges that truth isn't always absolute. Instead, a proposition is true, at least provisionally, if it survives rigorous public scrutiny and passes the discipline tests specific to its field. It places the whole determination of truth right in the public forum, driven by ongoing evidence and argument.
Okay, Section 4. Truth in educational research and mapping the paradigms. So how do these 5 abstract philosophical theories actually map onto the daily, on-the-ground work of researchers?
Well, this maps out perfectly as a sort of ultimate cheat sheet. It absolutely proves that no matter what kind of research you do, you are relying on truth. Doing classical empirical research, you're relying on correspondence. Building expansive social theories, you lean on coherence. Doing classroom action research, that's pragmatism. Qualitative evaluation, that relies on consensus. The message here is crystal clear. You cannot conduct research without anchoring it to at least one of these frameworks. It's just not possible.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, the postmodernist paradox, or getting caught red-handed. Let's interrogate the most notorious suspects in this academic flight from truth, constructivists and postmodernists. Right within the pages of the British Educational Research Journal, David Bridges actually takes aim at influential writers who explicitly disavow truth in their research frameworks. He specifically targets the highly renowned work of researchers Guba and Lincoln.
In their hugely influential book on evaluation, Guba and Lincoln boldly claim, and I quote, "Indeed, there is no universal truth to which our construction is a more or less good approximation." And boom, there it is. They are caught right in the trap. They are stating, as a universal truth, that there is no universal truth. But Bridges digs even deeper into their text to see if they actually manage to dispense with truth in their day-to-day practice.
And guess what? Bridges found that even when actively denying truth, these researchers implicitly demand it absolutely everywhere. They use phrases like "we hope," which is asking the reader to accept their truthful state of mind. They demand that a construction must fit and work, which, hey, is just pragmatism. They demand confirmability to ensure data isn't just a figment of their imagination. And they seek isomorphism, which is really just a fancy academic word for accuracy, to truthfully capture realities. Folks, that is just correspondence theory under a different name. These truth concerns absolutely refuse to go away.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to really ponder. If even the most staunch, hardcore postmodern critics of truth must actively rely on it to validate their own arguments, can we ever truly communicate or learn without it? Truth isn't just some outdated dogma to be feared or hidden away behind inverted commas. It is the inescapable, dynamic standard that sits at the very heart of how we know what we know. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep pursuing the truth.